Morning, everybody. Excited that you were joining us here. We're having a few moments of difficulty here with the speaker joining, so give us a second and we will get back in hopefully in just a minute or two with the webinar. All right. Jessica's with us now, everybody. Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning. Thanks for having me today.
A minute here or two for anybody else to join. I'll give an intro and then we'll kick off.
All right.
Jessica, do you want me to advance or do you want to do the sharing?
You can advance, that's fine.
All right.
Have we talked about how questions will be asked or how we want to?
Yeah, I think everybody, I don't know if everybody's listening yet, but yeah, I'll say we'll do some Q&A at the end, but again, chat, Todd's there managing the chat too, so we'll see if anything comes in.
Great.
Todd, I think we'll get started.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today for this webinar. And we're going to touch on smart packaging strategies. And I know all of you on the call know that your packaging holds more than just your product. It impacts the shelf life, the food safety, the brand perception, all those things wrapped together in the package. And we're excited to join today with Jessica Schwartz, founder of Strategic Packaging Partners. And she brings nearly 20 years of packaging engineering experience, everything from food to apparel, furniture, CPGs. And she holds a master's degree from the Michigan State University. And I love this. She's known by her clients as a packaging therapist because she really does help uncover some of the root causes of the packaging challenges out there and brings clarity to some of those complex decisions. So Jessica and her team really bring a holistic approach to packaging, connecting those dots between product needs, brand goals, the technical requirements, and those supply chain realities. And we will have time for Q&A at the end for sure, but also you can put things in the chat and we'll be monitoring that too. So we are thrilled today to have Jessica with us. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, so my hope today is to give you all kind of a packaging 101, things that you can think about, take back to your teams. And that could also guide maybe some future webinars that we do. So we can dig in and we're going to focus on, like I said, kind of the broad impact of packaging across your organization. Because if you think about packaging, for a lot of companies, no one truly owns it. There's not like a group of people that own it unless they have packaging engineers. But packaging touches procurement, operations, quality, and logistics. And so there's a lot of different entry points for ways in areas that packaging can help or hurt your organization. So you can go next. All right, so we'll touch briefly on kind of those areas of impact. So when you think about procurement, first of all, as businesses grow, they tend to incorporate more suppliers. So maybe you start off with a distributor and then you gain scale. So now you're actually direct sourcing from a supplier. And as you kind of increase in that complexity, there are opportunities for inefficiencies to kind of enter the picture. When you think about, okay, how do I strategically order the right number of packaging units and get the best price? What does that strategy look like? We had a client once whose buyer was ordering at the cheapest packaging tier, which meant the largest quantity, and nobody noticed that they had a huge stock of packaging until there were 12 drop trailers at the plant, right? So max control of the packaging, that's one thing. But if you're working for or with a contract manufacturer, how can you work with them to minimize complexity on their side, meet the demands of what you want to produce for your consumers, and get more aligned on cost efficiency that way? In terms of operations, kind of off that complexity of sizes topic, anytime you have to change a size, you have to change guardrails, you have to change cartoners, case packers, just like kind of through the whole production line. So how do you maximize that process? So maybe you're sticking with the same footprint, but varying the height.
Jessica, you are freezing here. Can you hear us okay?
Everyone, we're
Hold
having
on
a
a
couple of
second, everybody.
issues. Yeah, hold on one second. And Rachel wants to try to call Jessica.
Hold on, everybody. We hopefully get her back here. All right. Jessica, you were freezing up there.
Hi, sorry about that. All right,
We are back now.
we're back. Okay.
I think you were there under operations is where we lost you.
All right, let me try this one more time and then I might need to move to a different location. Okay. So in terms of operations, trying to understand your manufacturing, where your efficiencies are at, and then making decisions based on data. So let's see here. All right. So in terms of when you're designing a new product, for example, not just starting with sales and marketing for, what the billboard should be, how they want this product to start on the shelf, to look on the shelf, but also incorporating packaging engineering thoughtfulness or operations into the initial design. We've had instances where the design team and the product team create a product that either can't be produced from a packaging standpoint or can't run on the line. So getting the technical folks in early on when you're designing a new product is really key to mitigate a lot of problems. Whether you have your own manufacturing or you're working with a contract manufacturer, understanding labor demands and rework and things that are going on that you may not be aware of, asking those questions of your co-man, being a good partner, what's going on with our product, how can we get better, In the co-man space, there's a lot of different brands, right? They're making products for a lot of different brands, and there's a lot of relationships to manage. And so if you can be a good partner to them and understand, like, how do I make things easier for you? That'll work for you in terms of how your cost structure is and how you can get more efficient and save money. All right, from a quality standpoint, from a quality standpoint, packaging data is really, really important. So when you think about your packaging data, what you're buying, what is the thickness, what's the material, how much does it weigh? Those are all things that you should be capturing. If you're smaller and you don't have an ERP system and you have it in a spreadsheet, having someone own that's really important. That's really important because if you ever see an issue, you can go back to your packaging data to say, okay, is it a packaging material issue? Are we getting the packaging that we thought we were? Like maybe the supplier messed up a little bit. You got the wrong coefficient of friction and now it's not going through the bagger right. So what is your packaging data and what did you buy and what did you get? And then when you think about consolidating materials or getting more efficient, the data, you can mine it for opportunities. And as you think of EPR, that's a buzzword, sustainability. If you have your packaging data, you can look at it to say, okay, what materials am I using? Are any of these materials ones we should consider trying to eliminate? And then when you do an elimination of maybe you have styrofoam, when you do that elimination, then you'll have your data to say, hey, we eliminated this volume of styrofoam at this material weight. This is the number of pounds we were able to eliminate from our products. And you can build your own sustainability story regardless of how large your organization is. The last area we'll talk about is distribution. So when you think about shipping your product, a lot of times what happens is you'll visit with your customer, they'll tell you how many units they want in a case, and then you'll say, great, design a box for that, design a pallet pattern and go. If you have a moment to pause and you can kind of work backward to say, okay, my pallet is 40 by 48. I have to pay to ship all the air above that pallet. So how do I maximize the amount of product I can get on a pallet? And we've had situations where just taking an 1/8 of an inch out of a carton, which isn't really noticeable typically, 1/8 of an inch, can actually get many, many more cases on a pallet because of how many units are impacted just by that 1/8 of an inch. So it's good you can ask your corrugated suppliers for help on that. Like, hey, this is what we're thinking in terms of a carton size and a case count. Can you give me a pallet specification so that I can take a look at that and say, okay, maybe we should consider tweaking things, right? So somewhere around 90% pallet efficiency, like if they give you like a pallet spec, there should be an efficiency percentage on there, and you should target 90% and see if you can reach it by making small tweaks early on in the design, of course, right? If you already have artwork and die lines, it's a little bit too late. So getting ahead of that curve, kind of how we talked about earlier, just getting technical people involved sooner than later in a new product development. All right, you can go to the next one. So this kind of just iterates things a little differently and just how the ripple effect can kind of take place. You have your procurement, your buying, what you're buying, and the quality that you're buying. So when you think about your suppliers, how do you get to a point where you evaluate not only their cost of their materials, but their proximity to your plant or resources they have to help you run a trial, or in general, what's their on-time delivery? Do they do programs like VMI or vendor managed inventory? Because that feeds into then operations and how that relationship between what you're buying interacts with what's happening at the plant and how the packaging is running, and if it's running efficiently. And then that feeds into the material quality and making sure that just everything is connected and working together, so you're shipping the most efficient pallets and taking complexity out of the system. You can go to the next one. Okay, so packaging can be really overwhelming because it's fragmented across the organization. And so I made a list here of some of the things we maybe covered already, but just in one place in terms of mitigating extra cost and risk. So consolidating packaging materials and sizes. We had a client once, they had 12, they had grown kind of by acquisition, and they had 12 different carton sizes for bag in the box products. And they decided like that's not efficient, and we want to do a brand redesign. So during that moment of a brand redesign is a great time to kind of take a look across your portfolio of products to say, hey, could we get more efficient anywhere? Because you're already buying new plates and you're already touching, you know, all the cost components of changing a size. So just kind of look across your data, get your data from your suppliers, first of all, and then just look across like your portfolio, like how are you doing? Do you have a ton of different sizes, or are you pretty well consolidated? And that can be sizes and material structures. And then if you have enough, if your volume's high enough, and you get certain run quantities, usually suppliers will hold somewhere around like 30 to 60 days of materials if you're part of a VMI, a vendor managed inventory program. So chat with them about that. If you're having issues with inventory kind of building up in your warehouse and you don't have enough space, because that's money, right? Every space that has product in it is costing you. And then kind of monitoring manufacturing metrics. So what are you monitoring right now? Are you monitoring throughput? You have a predicted amount of product you should get through in a day. Are you hitting those targets, or are you kind of lacking? What is your OEE? Are we at 60, 70%? Can we get to 85? Like what's holding us back there? And being able to understand savings too. For example, if there's a product that isn't running very well for some reason, and you may need some change parts, for example, you need to invest in either change parts or new parts. Well, what's the cost of your scrap? What's your cost of not meeting your goals, your OEE goals? And that cost can be something you present to your business team to say, hey, we can afford to make this change because we're losing all of this product and money by not doing it. And then root causing downtime. There's a tool called the 5 Whys, and you can Google it if you haven't heard of it. But essentially, it's asking why multiple times in a way to get to a root cause. Like, why did you miss your throughput target? Well, this product caused a significant amount of downtime. Okay, why did that product cause a significant amount of downtime? Well, the cartons weren't running well. They were getting jammed in the cartoner. Okay, well, why were they getting jammed in the cartoner? Well, the material, we measured the thickness, and it's a lot thinner than what we usually get from the supplier. Okay, so why was it thinner? Like, you know, get on the phone and call the supplier and say, hey, we've noticed this fact that this carton is a lot thinner. It's not running through our cartoner. Can you help us out? So that would be an example of one of those tools. All right. And then keeping specifications accessible. So oftentimes what happens is you'll call up a supplier and you will ask them for maybe a new carton size or a new whatever. They will provide you with samples. Maybe you send some to your plant, hopefully you do, to get their input on the material. But then you just start using it then. Maybe you're doing shelf life, maybe not. I recommend you do some kind of shelf life. And maybe you do some testing, or maybe you don't. There's just a variety of ways people handle the introduction of new packaging into their systems. Ideally, you would have a data-driven decision. You would have tests, you'd run tests to make sure that the packaging ran well, and that maybe could be a different topic, but making decisions that you know will create positive outcomes. A lot of people have ERP systems, but not ones that include packaging modules, which is a problem. I have seen people handle data in different ways. It's difficult if the data isn't in a central ERP system, but as long as you have someone who can collect the data from all of your suppliers and put them into one central Excel spreadsheet, then you're good. So you're going to want to know things like the packaging, everything that's on the spec sheet, basically, that you get from your supplier. And then you can kind of compare between suppliers and say, okay, am I getting all the data that I need? Because the worst thing to happen is if you want to do an RFP, you want to do a competitive bid, and that's the time you need to ask your suppliers for the data, because you just don't want to signal anything, right? And you also want to be able to look at your data for ways to save money and ways to be more efficient. All right, and the last is around pallet patterns. So again, can you hit a 90% efficiency rating on your pallets for the number of cases and fit across the pallet that you have with your product? And there is money in that, right? So you can work with your logistics team. If you have an underutilized pallet, you can start calculating savings for getting to that 90% efficiency, which is helpful for decision making. All right. This is an example I mentioned earlier around one of our clients that we help them consolidate carton sizes. So you can see that this photo here on the right has cartons and bags. We were focused on the carton side of things. So they had a complex system. They had multiple different locations, multiple different SKUs, but they had this moment where they were converting from, well, this was through an acquisition actually. So Barilla purchased Back to Nature, and they wanted to do bring something to the brand. It kind of been tossed around different equity groups, and there was a lot of inefficiencies. So we were able to work with their contract manufacturing to reduce the number of sizes and kind of come to the market with a more unified brand. You get savings from it. All right. So really, I mean, in conclusion, I want to iterate that you can do small things as you grow to get your packaging data, make decisions that work for operations, have a strategy around kind of how you stay and design into the most efficient packaging possible up front. And then there's always ways you can come back, have conversations with your vendors, your packaging suppliers, your contract manufacturers to say, okay, how can I do things better? But it really comes to, it really is the foundation of all of the conversations is data. So it's important to have your packaging data in-house and leverage it from there. So I think we have time for Q&A. And I'm interested in kind of initial reactions from everybody here, because it could inform also future opportunities to help you guys do good things for your businesses. So.
Right, is everybody off mute here now, Todd, or anybody who raises their hand? I can.
Nope, they have to put their questions into chat.
All right. Okay, guys, put your questions in, and throw in here, Jessica? Are there materials that you think are going to be coming down the pipeline that are going to be really game changers, or is there anything kind of trend wise? I guess I'll ask trend wise first before efficiency. You're on mute.
I would say in the last 5 or so years, recyclable materials have come a long way. 5 years ago, if you had a granola product you wanted to put in recyclable film, you could anticipate paying 10% more and losing around 30% efficiency. You'd have to run the lines slower to heat and seal the recyclable film. And those films have come a long way. So there's a number of films that run at parity with the traditional non-recyclable films, which is exciting. And in the compostable space, compostable packaging space, that's a little more challenging. Most compostable packaging is being used now from a marketing standpoint versus like a true end of life, the packaging will be composted. So there's a lot of trickiness in that space. Nonetheless, there's still a lot of R&D going on, but I can give you an example. So right now, if you wanted a compostable film structure, let's say you were doing condiments or peanut butter or something that needed a multi-layer structure, we're still at a point where each layer of that structure is made by a specialist, a different company, and then they're all sent to one place and put together and laminated, which is crazy because it's not that's not it's not the most efficient way, right? Because you're getting layers from Europe, you're getting layers from the US. So that's kind of an interesting space to keep an eye on. Additionally, you're going to see more backyard compostable options. So if you think about industrial compostable, I'm trying to think, it's something like in 6 weeks, the product has to break down into 3-centimeter pieces or smaller. It's something like that. And you need heat and you need turning. So you have to have heavy equipment and you have to really manage the piles. Whereas like in a backyard composting situation, there's different parameters. Now, I don't think it's realistic to think that everyone would compost all of their packaging because you need the right mix of things, but that's an interesting space to watch, as well as some functional packaging. So when you think about nanomaterials or you think about different elements that can be added to packaging. For example, there's a product you can print either on a sticker or on film that helps fresh fruit and vegetables maintain moisture so they don't shrivel up, as well as retards like the yellowing of leafy greens, and it can be applied kind of when the product's harvested or when it's packaged. So adding function to packaging is going to be a big deal. Now, how that interacts with EPR and different types of legislation, that's kind of left to be seen, but those are a few things there.
I see down trends there. So anybody else here?
We can also take questions on problems that you guys are seeing or, things you're looking for advice. I'm happy to try to help. If I can't help on this call, I could follow up too.
Also, if you raise your hand, I can unmute people individually if they'd rather just speak out.
Everybody is pretty quiet. Jessica, just any last few thoughts here before we sign off? Just maybe some of those greatest hits that you see time and time again that you wish you could always get in front of somebody to mention.
Yeah, I think I covered everything. I think, just reiterating the data piece is really important. It's important for cost, for sustainability, for savings. It's everything really. So if you can just get your data together, that's like the foundation of work, of all the work in packaging. And if you guys have any questions, things come up and you're like, gosh, should have asked this, just send the questions to Rachel and she can get them over to me. If we get enough questions around certain topics, we could even potentially do another webinar on a specific topic versus being more general as we are today. So thanks for joining.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for the time today.
All right.